Welcome back to the Chasing Happiness podcast, an honest podcast about finding happiness, what it really means, and the process of getting there. My name is Crystal, and today I'm going to have an amazing conversation with a wonderful woman. Melissa Miller is a blogger. She is a mom. She is a wife. She is a lot of different things, and we're going to talk about how she's balancing being a stay-at-home mom as well as a caregiver. But before we get into all of it, Melissa, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody who's listening?
Oh, totally. Hey, everyone. I am Melissa Miller. I am a mom mentor and caregiver coach for moms who are transitioning from being a workforce mom into being a full-time stay-at-home mom and spousal caregiver. I'm a wife of 10 years. I have a 3-year-old, and life is just crazy. And I love to read and knit and just be with family and friends in between all the craziness of work and motherhood and caregiving.
And I love this because I think, especially right now, I don't have kids myself, but I am literally surrounded by everyone I know having children. And there seems to be this debate going on in the world right now, especially amongst my age group of, do I become a stay-at-home mom or do I go back to work? Do I, when I choose to have children or when we choose to have children, do I find that balance? And then do I get shamed if I choose to stay home or go back to work? So let's start with, how did you make the decision to be a stay-at-home mom?
Well, first off, I want to say that I'm so glad you answered this question because your girl just light the fire under my butt for once. Okay. But yeah, there is still so much. So let's start there for a minute. There is so much stigma around being a stay-at-home mom or being a working mom. And it's interesting that I've done both. Now, I had planned initially on being a workforce mom because financially speaking, neither my husband or I had the capacity of income that we could live off of just one income. There's just no way. So that made it an easy peasy, lemon squeezy, no brainer choice for us. But at the same time, I totally respect other moms who do make that choice and families, couples that mutually make that choice of choosing to have the mom stay at home to care for the kids and the husband supports the family financially. I get that. But here's another question, though, for you. What if it isn't a pre-planned decision? What if you don't get to have a say in making that choice? What if something cataclysmic happens and you have to choose to make that choice? Now, that's what happened to me personally, is I was a workforce mom. We were working opposite shifts to avoid daycare expenses because I don't know where y'all live, where we live. It can be as much as you pay in rent or a mortgage per month, or just one kid alone, even the 3 kids. It's insanely expensive. So forget it. But what if you have an unexpected illness or injury to your spouse and you're young in your prime? My husband was 53 when he got sick, and I was only 33, 34. So what do you do when you're thrust with that and you have little kids at home like I did? That's what led to me being a stay-at-home mom. Is my husband had contracted an unpredictable, incurable chronic illness, and there was a pandemic going on. We have a small child at home, and then on top of that, we have family and friends that, as much as they would love to probably help, they have kids. They have health issues of themselves. So really, it was like a no-brainer decision in that sense. Now, was it easy? No. But it was also kind of thrust to where I had no choice.
Which I think is a really important thing to point out. I'm glad you brought it up because I think so often in this weird social media world that we live in, people think they understand people's lives because they see these images, they see these things posted online, and they're like, well, I know what you're going through, but you don't see all the stuff behind the scenes. So in your circumstance, people know that you're staying at home, but they may not know everything that led up to that. It wasn't you woke up one morning and decided to stay at home. Life forced your hand a little bit, and you had to figure out how to make it all work. So I think it's important that we remind people, like, the judgment of you thinking you know what's going on when you haven't had the conversation with that person. We need to get past that because nobody lives in your shoes. Nobody could have said to you, this is the decision you need to make, because nobody was having to live your life.
Absolutely. And that's the whole thing that I want to drive home about too, is that even though initially the decision was a very fast decision, once I had to make that choice, it didn't hit right away. My husband's diagnosis didn't come until 8 months after he started having after he started exuding symptoms, if you will, that there was a problem. He had his first seizure in December of 2019, and we didn't know it was a seizure at the time. We thought it was just he was passing out because he was exhausted. Because let's face it, at the time we had a daughter that was just about to turn 1. He was working 40 plus hour work weeks to help provide for our family. And of course, with having a small child, you're not sleeping through the night. Hello. And so we thought it was something like that. And with the exhaustion, obviously, with me having a 15-year background as a certified nursing assistant, I thought, maybe he just has a chemical imbalance. Like maybe he's low on iron or something, and it's just making him feel sick and not feeling so hot. And so we can just address it with medication, and move on. Never for a million years did I think that we would be getting a diagnosis of epilepsy 8 months later. And it's in his health. And here's the thing. Sometimes I do want to point out that when your spouse is exuding a symptom, it might start slowly, that and that snowballs later. And that's what happened with my husband. He had 1 seizure in December. He had 1 in January, and we were already starting to see a neurologist taking him to the hospital for that first incident. And seeing our primary, just, doing all the things to see what was going on. And then February was quiet of 2020. And then March of 2020, he had 1. Things were really low key. We thought, okay, this is no big deal. We can manage. And we both didn't really know much about the neurological world either, in terms of like seizures and epilepsy and things like that. So April, something happened. We don't know what, but my husband's health started to decline. It got out of control. That was the first month he had 10 to 20 plus seizures a month.
Wow.
It was so bad. He blew through his first medication that we tried. Didn't work. Didn't slow anything down. Nothing. By May, that's when I was having to start deciding, what do I do? Okay, if he's going to keep having seizures like this, for one, are we going to find something? Okay, well, actually, let me back up. 1, are we going to find something that's going to nip us in the butt?
Right.
2, for safety, because we have a small child, is it really appropriate for me to be working outside the home and playing cold turkey and hoping that he doesn't have anything happen while I'm gone and he's home alone with our daughter? And then 3, can I find something to replace my income if I transition home? Because if I quit my job, talk about income, we're going to lose half of our income right there. So it wasn't and even then when I went on in May, when we switched from a general neurologist to a specialist neurologist, and we started another medication and a new treatment, I went on a 3-week medical leave because things were so out of control. I was like, I need to be home right now. And knowing too, with the specific medication, it put him at even more risk for even more breakthrough seizures from what our doctor was saying. So I need to be home. But I knew in my gut, I was starting to have that gut feeling like, okay, this might be something bigger than just a cold, the flu, something we think that we can treat like within a short amount of time. This might be lifelong. This might be permanent. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know what to do. What am I going to do? I have no other background or training.
Right.
I have no backup plan with other caregivers in my family. What do I do? Yeah. So it wasn't so it wasn't like a night and day choice. It was a gradual choice, just seeing my husband get sicker and sicker. And then obviously in my gut realized, okay, I have to do something else. But what do I do?
And that, I think, is the almost most important question, right? What do you do? Because when we come to face things as human beings that we don't know how to handle, sometimes we get stuck in that, what do I do? What choice can I possibly make? Is it going to be the right one? And then we start to cycle through that thought process of, well, what if this doesn't work out? And what if this happens? And then what if this happens? So how did you navigate, one, not knowing? Because obviously you had no answers when you had to start making these decisions. But then when you started to navigate it, it must have been insanely stressful.
It was scary. I'm going to say it was flat out scary. Thank God. I mean, I realized I have a little bit of an upper hand with having a prior 15-year background in healthcare. It helps me be a little more efficient and have some tricks up my sleeve. After taking care of patients for 15 years, it does help me manage medications and treatments and coming up with a protocol, if you will, or a rule or routine, if you will, for those who aren't so well versed in the medical field of how to care for my husband. I have to admit, that has been a godsend. But I realized not everyone has that. And so I do have an upper hand with that. But still, even so, it was scary because it was like a crash course for me. Even though I have that 15-year background, not once in my career did I have a patient with a seizure disorder, let alone epilepsy, you know? And so I was totally out of my head. So it was like trying to navigate having a 1-year-old, trying to navigate a pandemic, trying to navigate making that choice and starting to make those hard choices of what do I do for our family's future, not knowing if the treatment's going to, not really. I think my husband and I both were in denial at that point. We just didn't understand the gravity of what it means to have a seizure disorder and that there is no cure. All you can do is manage it. Right. And it's lifelong. Once you have it, you have it. There's nothing there's no treatment, a permanent treatment or cure yet. Praying to God that we get one day, but right now there's nothing.
Sure.
And so, and then of course, the big question, like you just asked, what do I do for income? What do I do? Do I pull the trigger on my job and come home, but then I lose half my income? How are we going to pay the bills?
Right.
It was incredibly scary. And then plus with everything shut down with the pandemic, that made it even worse. So any resources I could tap into were either tapped out because so many more people, a whole bunch more people were also being impacted by the pandemic with loss of income, jobs,
Right.
things just shutting down. And then also even just the typical resources for people who are struggling like we are, resources like, applying for food stamps, Medicaid, help with utility bills or your mortgage or rent payment. In our area, they were tapped out. All the places I knew to call to get help, they were tapped out. So there's this huge extra long wait list. So that makes it even more stressful because we have bills coming that are due.
Sure.
I'm trying to navigate and then I was job hunting. So I was trying to find something I could do, but here's the problem. I couldn't find anything that would really be appropriate for my new lifestyle. That if right now, if my husband has a seizure, I would be dropping this call right now and I'd be running and taking care of my husband and making sure my daughter was safe. Yeah. To be honest, that's the way it runs.
Sure.
That's how I live. That's the way it runs. But every job I was looking into, I ran into the problem of I need to be tied down to my phone or my computer for 8 hours a shift, to do like telemarketing calls. Hello. No. Right. They wanted either a bachelor's or a master's. I have neither. They wanted even for like food service. I was, this is crazy. They wanted like X amount of experience in that specific field, but they wouldn't take you. And then wow. I have neither. All I have is healthcare, and obviously healthcare jobs are out the window because I would still have to leave the house. That totally defeats the purpose of what I'm trying to do. So It was insane. It was absolutely insane.
That's a lot. And I think people listening, because we've all lived through the pandemic for the last couple of years, people listening are probably like having heart palpitations a little bit because we know as people who haven't had to deal with that kind of a medical issue, how hard it's been for us. Right. And like, I can only speak to my personal experience, but I can't even fathom all of the nights that you probably stayed up stressed out because you had so many things to try to navigate. You've clearly found a way to at least make it functionable in certain times. So now that you sort of are over some of that hump, does it feel a little less overwhelming now that you're starting to find that groove, or are you still sort of sitting in the stress of all of that?
That's a very open-ended question, Crystal. I'll speak to it on 2 points. Okay, on one point, talking about the sleep, I have not slept well in like 2 to 3 years. I mean, I sleep, but my ear is always on alert. You, as a caregiver dealing with a illness that is unpredictable, is damaging. I mean, for those who don't know about epilepsy or seizure disorders, it affects your brain. We're talking about your brain here. So if enough damage happens, it can impact your short-term memory, it can impact your long-term memory, and there can be other problems too. So it's very serious if it's not treated and managed. So I live in alert mode all the time. Like right now I have my earbuds in while we're having this conversation, but I'm in earshot. I mean, my dad's out there with my family right now, but I'm in earshot. Like if I need to run, I run. You know what I mean? So, or I have my phone beside me. Like if I get a text saying, come, like if my husband's at work, like, okay, do I need to run? Because that's what happened, to be brutally honest. That's what happened yesterday. I was at home and I got a call from my husband's work saying that my husband had a seizure. And so I had to go and pick him up from work and bring him home. So that's life. And so you never totally I would say you never totally rest or go out of mom or caregiver mode, if that makes sense, because it is so unpredictable. You want to be on your game. Obviously, things are quieter now or calmer now. I should say. 2 years in, we got him on a better medication. He's not having 10 to 20 seizures a month anymore. He's not even having an X amount of consistent number of seizures per month anymore, but it's still happening here and there.
Sure.
But so that is nice that it's, but then at the same time, you get used to the chaos. And so when it is calmer, you get scared a little bit, you don't want to lose your edge of being able to respond like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
If something goes down. So that's scary. So in that sense, I'd say it's never going to probably go away, I don't think, because I just am on alert for making sure my family is safe and my husband's safe, and that will be for the rest of my life. But I do feel, on the other hand, I do have a bit more of a routine. I have figured out how to make it work. I get up early in the morning to work so that my daughter, when my daughter sleeps and everyone else is sleeping, I can work when it's quiet and I'm not having to worry about chasing her, and my husband can rest. So that helps and takes some of the burden off them for childcare because everyone's asleep. So it works. It's still a day-to-day process. I'm still healing. I burned out so bad in 2020 because I did not keep up on my wellness visits. I already have hypothyroidism for 14 years and I get a lot of gut problems from that. And by 2021, I could tell something was wrong because my gut problems were worse than normal, And it took all of 2021, 4 doctors and a couple procedures and to find out what was wrong. And then I finally just got diagnosed with IBS in December. Wow. So burning out and not implementing consistent me time, self-care, keeping up on my wellness visits as often as I should have, I definitely paid for. So I've come through the fire in that sense too. And I've learned that, okay, I have to prioritize my self-care. I need to make sure I see my doctors regularly. I need to make sure I stay on my medications regularly. I need to make sure I monitor my diet, so I avoid triggers and flare-ups. I need to go to the doctor if there is a problem. Right. And I need to make sure I take time to take breaks and do something that's for me. So, because I am dealing with a lot more than the average person, being not only being just a wife and a mom, but being a caregiver to a sick spouse, and dealing with my own health issues. So it's critical. So it's still a learning process, Crystal. I would say that it's better, but it's always a day-to-day process and it's a journey. Every season's different. It looks different now than it did 2 years ago when my husband first started having seizures and that last spring. It's crazy to think about, we're in 2022 now, and 2020, the spring of 2020 was hell because my husband's health was just so out of control. Just not getting a break for like 4 to 5 months and blowing through 3 medications and 2 doctors and not having any sign. It felt like it was like we were ever going to get a break.
Wow. And then the pandemic on top of all of that.
Oh yeah. It was like the perfect storm. That's what my dad said. My dad said, it's like we had like the perfect storm. My husband got sick in December of 2019. The pandemic hit between January and March, so we shut down. And then my husband's health really started to spiral by May of 2020. So, it was anything that could have been thrown at us, it pretty much did. Wow. So it was totally, so 2020 is awful for a lot of us anyway, because of the pandemic, but it was extremely horrible for us because of my husband's illness. It was extremely horrible.
Well, and you've touched on something that I think is really important because we often in this society talk about how parents need to take time to invest in their self-care. But people don't often talk about, as a caregiver to a spouse or anyone else, how important it is, because you are essentially the primary caregiver for another human being, even if we're not talking about a kid. And your health has to be a priority, because if it's not, there's no one to take care of that person.
Right. And self-care, this is so aligned with the timing of this interview, because I'm just about getting ready to launch a new self-care journal and workshop, to lead into my one-on-one coaching. And it is so pivotal. When we think about self-care, we think about physical aspects, right? Making sure we get enough sleep, making sure we get enough nutrition, making sure we get enough hydration, and exercise, to maintain a healthy body. That is important. Don't get me wrong, but then do we even think about, and especially with touching on the pandemic and then adding in caregiving, like with me, do we even touch on the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual aspect of self-care? Those are a part of who we are. So not being afraid to go see a counselor or a therapist to deal with the PTSD and the trauma associated and the loss and the fear and the frustration and the anger that comes along with going through something like this. Because you basically are losing so much. I mean, my husband is feeling it from one end because he's the one that's physically going through it. He can't drive anymore for safety. He's had to cut back hours. We have to parent differently. He can never be home alone with our daughter anymore for safety. Because if he passes out, our 3-year-old can't call 911 or give medication or write detailed notes about what she's seeing when my husband sneezes, because that is an indicator of other things we might need to look at with managing his illness. So it's totally changed, and then plus, just the side effects of medication. They make you feel tired. They make you feel irritable. It just changes every dynamic, not only to the person that's actually going through it, but your marriage. It tests you mentally, like I said, the post-traumatic stress and the trauma and the fear and the anger and the frustration. My husband and I both have had to work through that. And then you deal with the emotional side, just dealing with all those emotions that you have never probably felt before. I've never been through dealing with something as traumatic and post-traumatic stress like this, and so, being, and with the stigma, again, like we talk about social media, about mental health. Hello, it's okay to go see a counselor. It's okay to go see a therapist if you need to process through, because they have more resources than what the typical person does, than your family or friends or even your spiritual advisor. And that's another thing too, spiritual self-care. For me personally, I believe in Jesus Christ. I'm a Christian, and he died to save my sins. And that faith is what keeps me going and what has helped me through this really dark time. And so, journaling, praying, getting involved with activities in my church. I mean, those are things that have I know for me personally, feed my soul and help me through. But what does that look like for someone else? It doesn't matter what, your congregation of faith, how can you get plugged in to feed your soul and get involved? Because you need to do something that is for you in a lot of different ways. So hobbies, volunteering, church or congregation of faith activities, even seeing a counselor, a therapist, a spiritual advisor. There's so many layers to it. And it goes beyond just making sure you get enough sleep, food, and rest and fluids. Do you know what I mean? There's so much more to it. And people, I don't think they put self-care just in the physical aspect, but they don't see like the other impacts of and on both sides, both, again, the person that's being diagnosed with it and the person that's actually caregiving.
Well, and also I would think the family surrounding you or the friends surrounding you and helping out, right? Like as a caregiver, you rely on other people for some things as well. And they're also impacted by how your life changes. They're also going through a transition or a change, right? Like, as you said, you and your husband no longer have the exact same life you had before. So it's not like on a Wednesday night, you're calling up your friends and heading to the bar, right? Like these things change. And so there is an adaptation in every relationship that you have. And I'm so glad you brought up therapy, because in my personal view, the world would be a better place if everyone went to therapy, because we all have things we need to work through, right? But there is such stigma about talking about these things. And the truth is, you could not have known before you went through this what this would have been like. There was no way for you to prepare for something like this. Even if you had dealt with patients before who had this, you still wouldn't have known yourself what it was like to live through it, right? But we have this stigma about talking to someone about that because we think, well, we should just know how to do it, which is the craziest thing to me, because how could we know? We've never done it.
Exactly. You've never lived through it. It's one thing when you see someone else go through it, but it's another thing when you actually go through it. And yeah, I mean, I could have, it probably might have helped to know kind of like what some of the triggers or associations of what medically, what to look for if I'd had an epileptic or a patient with a seizure, with the other type of seizure disorder. Sure. I guarantee that might have helped. still it's a whole different story when you're actually living through the fire and going through the situation yourself. And you're right, it does impact the family. I have family that we do have family that do help out. But we obviously have family that have voice, which I'm totally cool with. I know Daryl's illness better than anybody else. Okay. So I have family that have said, even my dad, like he feels more comfortable, like maybe helping out by watching our daughter in childcare. And then I'm the one that triages and takes care of him when something goes down. Same thing when we've had the need because we are living with my dad now following my mom's death. There's been times where we all have appointments, we all need to be somewhere and we need some backup help with transportation, or we need someone to stay here with my husband and family. And I give family members the choice. Obviously, and most of the time they have said, no, we'll help with transporting everyone else with where they need to go. We feel more comfortable with you staying home with Daryl because you know what to do and you know his illness. And I'm totally cool with that. I don't want to, that's the other thing you need to take into account what people feel comfortable with. Because like you say, it affects everybody. It affects the whole family of how you live your life and the needs that come with those adjustments because of that illness and life-changing situation. So yeah, it affects everybody and it's crazy. It's crazy, but it's possible. It's possible.
So one of the things I like to do on the podcast is ask questions of every guest who comes on. But before I get to the 4 questions I typically ask, I would like to ask you one extra question. Sure. Because as someone who has gone through this, I wonder if you have, whether it be a piece of advice or just some knowledge you want to share with everyone who's listening, who may know someone who is a caregiver, but has never actually thought about what that means because they're not living through it themselves. What would you say to people?
Being a caregiver is an incredible act of love above everything else. I mean, I could have probably figured out a way to outsource home health or a hospice agency. I mean, obviously hospice is not appropriate for us. It'd be more home health or even a nursing facility or whatever. You know what I mean? If the situation warranted that. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a little selfish. So for me, part of it was a little bit of selfishness. As a wife and a mom, I want to be here for everything. I want to be the one to be here every time my husband has a seizure. I want to be here, be the one that's comforting our daughter when she's scared because she doesn't understand why daddy doesn't wake up or why the EMTs are here. These strange guys with masks are coming into our home and she doesn't understand why. I want to be the one that goes and picks up my husband every time from work when he does have a seizure, because he's asking for me. Like yesterday, when I was talking with his coworkers, they say, and getting details about what happened so I could write it in my binder to keep track of notes for our doctor about what happened. She said the main thing was that he just handed the phone because he couldn't talk too much. And he said my name. He just wanted me. Aww. I would not, even though we've been through so much, Crystal, I would not change it for anything. Has it been tough? Yeah. Has it been scary? Oh, yes. But I don't regret that I made this choice. I've been here for everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I will say to caregivers and those who may not be aware of what caregivers go through, there is some good, but a lot of it's bad and ugly. There's a lot of bad days. There's a lot of ugly days. And it's not like this. It's up and down. There's some peaks, but there's a lot of valleys, because dealing with chronic illness means that you have a lot of flare-ups. And with each subsequent flare-up, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get back to the baseline, or so-called normal baseline, if you will, with that illness. So it's tough. And so I would say, if you know a caregiver, but you don't totally understand what they're going through, just reach out and give them support. Because, man, we are home full time with our families. And as much as we love them, as much as I love my husband and my little girl more than anybody, and I'm passionate about helping my moms and sharing my work and my story, it's draining. Sometimes it doesn't hurt when someone says, hey, I know it is, I will say on caregivers, it is up to us to say, hey, we need help. We have to ask for help. That is on us part of the time. But for those in our network, it's on you a little bit too to reach out to us, because we're dealing with a lot. We don't always have the wherewithal of like, if we're having an off day, like what happened yesterday, I'm not necessarily going to pick up the phone and call. I'm in mom mode. I'm in caregiver mode. Right. But maybe just a text or a phone call to that person that is a caregiver. Say, hey, we love you, sending good vibes, sending prayers. can I help? Can I come over and watch the kids for a few hours? So you could go out for maybe a Starbucks coffee or a Dutch Brothers and just get out of the house for some alone time, for even if it's just an hour.
Right.
Can I come over and do a load of laundry for you so you can take a nap because you've been up all night with sick kiddos, or your spouse having a bad flare up and is having to go to the hospital? Can I start a meal train for you? You know, is there something else I can do? You know, those types of things really help when you're going through it. I mean, obviously, like I said, for us, it's better. And we're with my dad now, so that helps too. But in the beginning, it was horrible. It was very isolating because I'd never been a stay-at-home mom.
Sure.
I was a new mom, with only a 1-year-old. And I was learning, and I was having a crash course in an illness that I knew nothing about. And there's no rule book. That's the thing.
Right.
When you're a caregiver, you have to write the rules. There's no rule book. There's no 101 caregiving. Even what I teach my moms, my stay-at-home moms and spousal caregivers, I give them what I've learned, and I try to give them the foundation, like the basics, like, okay, make sure you're prioritizing your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual self-care. Make sure you're preparing for the unexpected by making sure you update your spouse's medical information at all times, so it's ready to go if there's a flare-up, and you can keep moving the needle forward with your medical team to make sure things keep going forward. Make sure you're figuring out little ways to keep a head around your home in a way that makes sense to you. Obviously, I don't have a designated laundry day, for example, anymore, because life is unpredictable. The way I live now, it's by 15-minute tasks here and there throughout the day, and then just chipping away throughout the week versus designating one whole day to try to get everything done. Because guess what? The one day that I designate, that might be a really bad day for my husband, and I'm going to be in caregiver mode.
Right.
So I'm not going to get anything done. But at the same time, managing our home and having it organized to where we can find things, where we feel like we're not falling behind, is another form of self-care. There's so many layers.
There is so many layers. And I think it's really important for people to understand one of those layers is to just give yourself grace. Because as you said, there's going to be days where you have a plan and the plan goes completely out the window because that's what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. My 4 prompts I give my moms when I end any post, any email, and this is what I live by. We're doing the best we can. We know our family's better than anybody else. We're not alone, and we're allowed to give ourselves grace on those hard mom and caregiver days, because golly, they're going to happen, and more often than you want. I mean, we don't wish them, and I'm not saying to live in fear, like, be in the negative mind space. That's not what it's about.
Right.
But to give yourself grace on days that you cannot get a lot done. Some days you'll get more done. Some days you won't. It doesn't say anything about you as a mom, as a wife, as a caregiver. You are the most badass mom and caregiver for choosing to take care of your spouse at home, because it is a heck of a job and a responsibility. Okay.
Huge.
I can't, I know I can't make it better. And I wish I could cure all illnesses or injuries that our spouses go through. I can't do that. Only God can do that. And I'm not God. But what I can do is offer you hope and make you feel safe and help you figure out a way to do it in a way that works for you. And I think that's the big thing, is don't be afraid to ask for help, but then it's up to your people, your network, to go, hey, how can I help? Even if it's just a phone call of saying, how have things been this week? Has it been hell, or has it been pretty smooth and good? You know what I mean? Just hearing that sometimes just means the world. I had a message from one of my friends in my mastermind group this morning. She saw my stories that I'd shared that Daryl had a seizure yesterday. In my little journal prompts I do on Instagram, I mentioned on the part about prayer request, I put, just for healing and recovery for my husband, because he had a seizure today. And she got so concerned. And I had a video call with her this morning. That meant the world to me. And I shared that with my husband. You should have seen his face. She's more my friend than he is his, but he was just so touched.
Aww.
So touched that someone was concerned about him. Even though I'm her friend, even though we're best friends, she was really legitly concerned for my husband's well-being.
Aww.
That speaks volumes, guys. It's huge. I can't say that enough. It's huge to have support and for someone to say, hey, I got you. And since I've known the power of that, that's what I want to give. And I hope whoever's listening, if you are going through the fire right now, that you are not alone. Okay. It's tough. It's scary. All right. I wish I could just snap my fingers and make everything better for you, but I can't.
Don't we all?
Can't either, but we got you. I got you. And it is okay to be angry. It is okay to cry. It is okay to shout.
Yes.
It is okay to ask for help. What's not okay is for you to just stay stuck feeling scared and overwhelmed and not being able to move the needle forward.
Right.
Okay. May not be in a business capacity like it is with me, but at least in your motherhood and caregiving journey, that's where I want you to move the needle forward and being healthy so you can show up as the mom, the wife, and the caregiver that you are born to be.
Oh,
And that life can still be beautiful, even though you've been thrust into a whole world of pain and unpredictability and being scared. It can still, it's going to be okay. I know it doesn't feel like that. Believe me, if you talk to me, this girl that you see now is not the same girl that was back in 2020.
sure.
2020, if you'd said this to me, I would have said, you are crazy. I do not believe you for 1 minute right now.
Right.
It doesn't feel possible. You know what I mean? So, but it's possible. It's possible.
It's possible. And you're helping people find that it's possible. And I love that because really, like you said earlier, we don't come with an owner's manual. There is no guidebook. But if someone has experienced something similar to what you're going through, and they can even just offer a helping hand or a word of advice or encouragement, we all need that so desperately, regardless of the situation we're in, right? So I love that you're doing this for people. And I do want to be respectful of your time. So I do want to get to a couple of questions because I actually think a couple of these questions are super important based on the conversation that we're having. So the first question is, if you could go back and give yourself a piece of advice, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good one. I love this. If I could go back in time and give myself one piece of advice, just to keep going. Just keep going. I know some days you want to pull your hair out and you're tired, you're scared, you're frustrated. You try something, it flops. You try something else again, it flops. Just keep going. Just keep going.
I love that. I love that. The next question is, what inspires you?
Doing this work. The whole reason I'm here, that I'm having this conversation with Crystal, that I'm building a business is because I had no support. Real life 101, my daughter was photobombing our conversation. So there you go.
This is life, right? This is what happens.
This is life, mom life, hashtag mom life with a 3-year-old. Yeah. So the first one was, to just keep going, need to just keep going. And then the second one is, the whole reason I'm doing this was out of my own experience. When the pandemic shut down, I did start looking for resources online. But the problem I ran into was I could find stuff for like epilepsy, which is good. I'm not going to lie. It was helpful. And I could find stuff for stay-at-home moms, but I couldn't find something for if you're doing both.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a situation where you didn't choose, remember what we talked about at the beginning of this conversation,
Right.
where it was like, if you mutually decide whether right when you have kids or before you even just start trying to have kids, that the mom's going to stay home at home, and it's a mutual decision that you feel is best for your family.
Right.
What about if you're thrust into it unexpectedly? Because that's what happened to us. We were married for, a few years, we were married. We finally had our kid after 6 years of infertility. We had a plan about how we were going to work and raise our family. Then the unexpected happened and my husband got sick. No paramedical history. Because here's the other thing I want to interject here, if you're willing to go here with me. But
Yeah.
with epilepsy, it's usually diagnosed when you're a kid, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you have family history in your family. My husband had neither. So he's in that 20% of the population that for no apparent reason, you will be diagnosed with some sort of seizure disorder in your lifetime. Wow. So he falls in that 20%. So if it can happen to my family, it can happen to your family. So the whole reason I'm here is to raise awareness for that, but also just stand in the gap. And since there is no rule book, I'm creating a rule book and a guidebook for you. So another mom doesn't have to make the same mistakes that I did. That's the whole reason I'm here.
Right.
Is I want to stand in the gap and write content and raise awareness and coach and be there, be in the corner on those really nasty days as a mom and as a caregiver for those women. That's the whole reason I'm here. And that's what lies a fire under my butt. And that's why I'm here.
I love that. And since we're talking about that, I will post for everyone listening in the show notes all of the links so that you can not only follow Melissa, but get in touch, whatever you need. But what's the best way for people listening, if they do want to get in touch, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
2 ways. am on Facebook a little bit, but primarily, Instagram is where I'm at. So I'm focusing most on Instagram. So DM me on Instagram at Melissa Miller. 2011 is my handle. I have a bunch of free content over there. I'm doing a lot of series right now on my prompt plan. So that's just the foundation for navigating that role as a mom and as a spousal caregiver. And then also you can email me at melissamiller@tyrosupermom.com. Just shoot me an email. And then also just check out my website, melissamiller2011.podia.com. I have a ton of content over there. I have ebooks, free resources. I do have like I said at the beginning, a new course and a new journal and workshop that's coming out on the 25th of March. And then I'm also going to be opening up doors to my one-on-one boxer support coaching program on the 28th. So if you want to get in, sign up for the course, sign up for the workshop, and then you can get the details of how to get into my coaching program.
Perfect. And again, I will share all of that in the show notes for everyone listening. The last question I want to ask you, and this is something I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, is what does happipiness mean to you?
Ooh, it's interesting that you asked that question because it certainly is different now. I would say, obviously,
sure,
than what would have been 3 years ago, 2 years ago. I'd say happiness for me right now is just being able to find some good in the bad. And that's what I really see. I know I keep pinpointing it back to my work, but it's what really lights me up. It's been a way for me to channel the negativity, the hardship of what we've gone through into something beautiful and good. So the fact that I went through it alone and I didn't have a coach or a mentor, I didn't have any of the resources that I'm creating. It really is a blessing. I really feel like it's been a blessing from the Lord that I've been able to take my story, even as insignificant as it may seem, and spin it around for good and serve others. So to stand in the gap, to not only be able to work from home, which is something I never thought I would do. Hello, I'm the one that did not go to college. I don't have a bachelor's or a master's. You know, my cousin and my brother, they're the ones that did that. You know, he's the one that did that. So it's really funny how I'm kind of becoming one of the tech people in the family now, since I'm having to do all this stuff now, which is totally hilarious and totally unexpected. But that's okay. That's cool. But yeah, I'm just so thankful that God has made it available to me that I can create a way to provide for my family at home, work from home, be flexible, and also do something that has value for not only serving and honoring what I've been through as a caregiver and a stay-at-home mom, but also more importantly, serves other women and other families that are going through it, have been through it, and just need that leg up of support. Because I also want to touch on something here. It's interesting, you know, you talked about caregiving and how it's not always expected and people don't get it. Caregiving is on the rise. It is happening at a younger rate to younger people. We expect to care, because here's the other thing. You expect to care for your parents as they age naturally. You expect to care for your grandparents. But chronic illness among adults is on the rise as well too. You know, it's happening. Like I said, that statistic, 1 in 20 to 1 in 26% of the population will get a seizure disorder of some sort. And that's just one thing. There's so many other chronic illnesses out there that cause a lot of problems and are happening in younger adults. So there is a good chance that you will become a caregiver younger in life than what you think. And it could be to a special needs child. God forbid, I pray that does not happen to anyone. But that, or again, with a spouse, and it could be an injury, right? Not necessarily, an illness per se, but it could be an injury that becomes where they can't walk and or their speech is impaired or something to that nature. So it's happening. And I want to see more awareness raised to help these moms, not only by the work that I do, but maybe even more so on the state and federal level. You know, yes, there's Medicaid. Yes, there's food stamps. Yes, there's Social Security disability, but what about the support for the families financially? I mean, Social Security disability helps replace the income that your spouse loses. But what about if you're not like me and you can generate a business?
Right.
How do you pay the bills? So I want to see, and also better treatment research, because there needs to be more research until we can find a cure. That's the ultimate goal. So, because this is going to keep happening until we find a cure.
Right.
And it's going to continue to be a struggle for these women and these families until we have more people doing work like what I'm doing, raising awareness, coaching, mentoring, helping them come through the fire to help them cope with not only the physical, but the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects,
Right.
but then also in logistics of just how do you get a routine in a chaotic situation. But what can we do federally and statewide to create programs to support these people?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, there's so many layers that go into this.
There really are. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was so excited that you agreed to join me here, because I think a lot of people, unless you're living in that fire, you're not necessarily thinking about those things. But every single person who's listening to this podcast can get in touch with their representative, their local representative, and say, like, what do we do at a state level? How can we change things? What services are available for people? You know, I may not need them personally, but my neighbor might, or whatever, right? Like, everyone can get involved in some way, even if that's just sharing on social media and awareness of something that's happening that needs to change.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to say too, there's stigma about using food stamps and Medicaid, state services. Yes, there are people that abuse the system. And yes, to some degree, the system is broken because it's based off of income. But even off of income, you look at the numbers, it's like, oh, you made this net wise, but logistically, gross wise, when you take this home, it's not enough to pay the bills.
Right.
Hello. So I don't want you to feel shame if you have to use those services. We have been on food stamps at one point. We have utilized Medicaid as well. So don't feel shame for using those state programs that are there for when you're struggling. Because how else are you going to live? You need to be able to see the doctor. Your kiddos need to be able to see the doctor, because that's what happened with my husband. What we did was, it was cheaper for me when I was working as a CNA to be on one health insurance. And then we had my daughter and my husband on his insurance because he got a better rate for having a child plan, right? So it made more sense. It was cheaper and better coverage. So that's the way we did it. But what happened when my husband got sick? He cut back to part-time, so he lost his insurance. And so that meant my daughter lost her insurance as well. So there's a lot of aspects of how this impacts you. Financially is the biggest one, and just how you live is the biggest one. But I do want to say that let's just be kind and take the stigma out. If you need food stamps, please go sign up for food stamps. If you need to utilize Medicaid, please go use for Medicaid. If you need to access mental health support for dealing with the trauma and the anger and the frustration that you're going through, please do that. And also, I will say too, like, if you're in a situation like me where you can't be where it's too much, there's more. Like, my husband's high functioning; he can still work a few hours a week. He can and generate some income that way too, besides his SSD. And he is able to help with my daughter and everything else, and dress and feed himself and bathe himself. So he's pretty high functioning. But if you have a spouse or partner that has an illness or an injury that requires more hands-on care that you have to do everything for, we're talking, basic ideals like toileting, eating, dressing, and things like that, please utilize a home health agency, because they can help out because I worked for home health for a couple of years. I primarily worked in long-term care facilities, but I did work with home health, and they can be there for 8-hour shifts. They could be there overnight. They can even what I did is I had a lot of cases where I would just work a couple of hours a day for multiple people. So I would be there to help with getting some laundry done, helping transport them to the store, helping them with light house cleaning. And some are just there. And then there was one, I didn't really do anything. I just sat with her for a couple hours until her family would come to get her in the evening, for activities just to keep her safe. So someone was there to help her if she did have an incontinent episode or something like that. So research different home health agencies to see maybe what would work for you, because there's a lot of options out there, like I said, in terms of how much backup caregiving that you need. And again, if you get to a point where you have more time, where you don't need them, you need them more, you need them less, you can adjust the hours. Once you sign up, you can adjust the hours. Like, hey, I need a backup staff more than just 4 hours a day now. We're getting to that point where we need more hands-on care. And one other thing I do want to point out too, with home health and hospice, they do have social workers. And so those are good resources to tap into, not just for the person who's sick, obviously, but the resources are for the family too. So like when my grandma passed away, for example, we had a wonderful hospice agency, and my sister used the social worker. She talked to them a lot. So, because she was needing it. That was something she was. So please be aware that these resources not only help you do your job in terms of caring for your spouse or partner, but they also can help other members of the family. Because like you said, like you talked about too earlier about how the illness or injury affects not just you and your spouse and your children, it does impact the rest of the family. So the rest of the family, and like using the example with my grandma, the whole family had access to those resources, which was wonderful. Now, I didn't personally utilize them, but I'm thankful that the rest of my family could utilize those resources.
Yes. And there's no shame in needing help, regardless of what that help looks like, right?
No.
So I have loved this conversation with you today. And I cannot even begin to describe to you how valuable I think people are going to find it, because the amount of information that you've shared with people, I think even for people who aren't caregivers, is helpful, right? Like it applies to everyone. So thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. I love this. This is my favorite thing in the world. I love to share. I definitely am more of a talker than a writer. I'll just be brutally honest. That's why I love my coaching so much, my coaching packages and stuff that I do with my mom so much, because I get a chance to talk and get to know them and really connect with them. I mean, not to say that something written in a message or something can't be powerful or helpful. There's something about sitting down, having a conversation, it's just so powerful, and there needs to be more of it. And a lot of the time when I'm working, I'm talking to the camera by myself. So it's really fun when I get to do a collaboration and have a conversation with somebody else, especially when I know it's going to be impactful and powerful for somebody else. So thank you for having me. I really have loved this conversation. I definitely need to have you be a special guest on my Instagram for one of my weekly guests, because we have to carry this conversation on. It's so good. It's so good. And I'm sure people could benefit from your work as well, because it goes two ways. There's certain things that we take in, right, that are powerful. It's not about copying anyone to 100% to a T. I'd say it's more about taking the inspiration that you get from multiple places and then just tweaking it in a way that makes sense for you, right?
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. And I'm happy to hop on your Instagram anytime. I have loved this conversation. So I am 100% in for us to carry it on elsewhere. So thank you so much. All right.
We will make it happen. We will let y'all know when part 2 is coming, because this was so good. I love when the content is so high and there's such a high vibe for the quality. And we're just really in the zone of talking about stuff that's impactful and that's taboo and maybe isn't talked about. My opinion, my biased opinion, that's not talked about enough. Okay. So
agreed. Well, thank you so much, Melissa. This has been absolutely amazing. And for everyone who is listening, again, I will post in the show notes all the links, all the fun stuff. And I cannot thank you enough. This has been wonderful.
Oh, thank you for having me. I shout out to anybody listening. I wish you well. I pray that you have a safe and happy week. And please know, whether you are physically the caregiver yourself, or a friend or a family member that's going through being a caregiver, please reach out to them. Let them know that they're not alone. And just know that everyone's doing the best they can. Okay. No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. So just give yourself some grace. Remember, you're doing the best you can. Nobody knows your situation better than you do. And remember that you're not alone.
Yes, you are definitely not alone. And I appreciate that you all keep coming back week after week and listening to the podcast. I get to have amazing conversations like this and meet wonderful people like Melissa because you guys keep coming back week after week. So thank you for listening. You are absolutely not alone. And I hope you have a magical week. We will chat with you next week. Bye for now.